You think you're just a code monkey. You see the trees, but you never see the forest. It takes a visionary to build an empire from an idea. The words hung in the air, amplified by the convention center speakers. On the giant screen behind Victor, his PowerPoint slide glowed a brilliant corporate blue, washing out the color from his face. The audience of 1,000 tech investors and journalists applauded politely. He was at the peak of his power, a self-made genius on the InnovateCon main stage. I stood at the microphone in the aisle, my heart a cold, steady drum. "Victor," I said, "a quick question about your development timeline." We met at a university hackathon, a cliché born from caffeine and ambition. I was the coder, the one who could make a command line sing. Victor was the pitchman, the one who could sell water to a drowning man. He had a smile that could disarm a bomb and an energy that filled any room. We won, naturally. Our project was a data visualization tool, elegant and intuitive. My algorithm, his charisma. We celebrated our first round of seed funding at the Gilded Perch, a restaurant far too expensive for us, drinking champagne and sketching the future of our company, Synapse Analytics, on a napkin. That night, I believed we were invincible. The first red flag was small, almost invisible. We won a local tech incubator award 6 months in. When the article came out, it quoted Victor extensively and mentioned my name only once, misspelled, in the final paragraph. It was an oversight, he'd said, a simple mistake by the reporter. He was so apologetic, so charmingly self-deprecating, that I felt guilty for even feeling a flicker of annoyance. I was the one building the forest, after all. He was just the one showing it to the world. The next 2 years were a blur of success. We landed the Omnicorp account. We were featured in a puff piece in Wired. We moved into a glass-walled office on the 34th floor with a view that stretched to the horizon. Our nights were fueled by takeout from Priya's Curry House and the shared dream of an IPO. I coded, refined, and innovated. Victor schmoozed, networked, and closed deals. It felt balanced. It felt right. Then the cracks began to appear. He started taking investor meetings alone. "It's better if I handle the finance guys, Zara," he'd say. "You just focus on making the magic happen." He created a new corporate account for executive travel and entertainment, an account I couldn't access. When I questioned our burn rate, he'd wave a hand dismissively. "Don't worry about the small stuff. I'm playing the long game." The pronoun shift was gradual but unmistakable. We became I. The discovery was an accident, an email misdirected to my inbox from a law firm I didn't recognize. Wexler McGill. The subject line was Synapse IP filings. The attached invoice was for a series of patent applications. I opened the first one. It was my core algorithm, the very soul of our company, described in meticulous detail. The inventor's name listed was singular, Victor Pham. The world tilted. For the next 3 weeks, I lived a double life. By day, I was his partner, nodding in meetings and pushing code. By night, I became a forensic accountant. I used my admin privileges to comb through server logs, financial records on our QuickBooks Enterprise account, and state corporate filings. Every file I opened widened the chasm of his betrayal. He hadn't just filed one patent, he'd filed 5, covering every unique piece of technology I had ever built. And the executive account wasn't for travel. It was a fire hose, siphoning tens of thousands of dollars into a shell corporation. He must have sensed my suspicion. One afternoon, he called me into his office, a picture of concerned leadership. He presented a set of beautifully doctored profit and loss statements, showing us as healthier than ever. He was so convincing, so earnest, that for a split second, I almost erased the past 3 weeks from my mind. I almost believed him. But my eyes caught a detail on the page, a bank transaction dated for a Sunday, a day our bank was closed. It was a sloppy, arrogant mistake, and it told me everything. The breaking point came at an all-hands meeting a month later. With our 15 employees gathered in the conference room, Victor stood before the whiteboard and announced a strategic merger with a major competitor. It was an acquisition, a fire sale I knew nothing about. He hadn't just stolen my work, he was selling the company out from under me. He looked directly at me, his eyes full of counterfeit sympathy. Zara has been an invaluable part of our early journey, but as we scale, we need leadership with a broader vision. She'll be transitioning out to pursue her own technical projects, and we all wish her the best. The room was silent. My team looked at me with a mixture of pity and confusion. In that moment, the rage I should have felt was absent, replaced by a profound, chilling clarity. The plan began to form, not in my heart, but in the cold, logical pathways of my brain. As he spoke, my gaze drifted to his desk. I saw a small, branded USB drive he'd been given as a speaker gift. The logo on it read, InnovateCon 2024. That was his stage. That would be mine. The first person I called was Miss Sterling, a corporate litigator whose reputation was legendary. Her office was minimalist and severe. Justice isn't cheap, she told me, her voice like polished granite, but a well-documented case is priceless. The retainer was $25,000. I paid it without blinking. We had 4 weeks until InnovateCon. We worked in secret, usually late at night in my apartment, spreading documents across my dining table. One evening, we risked using the empty office to access the main server directly. We almost got caught. Victor's assistant returned for a forgotten laptop, her keys rattling in the lock. Sterling and I dove into the cramped, dark server room, the smell of ozone and hot electronics filling my lungs as we waited, breathless, for her footsteps to recede. The evidence was an ironclad fortress. We had 1. Time-stamped server logs showing my user account creating and modifying the core algorithm files beginning 28 months prior. 2. Victor's patent applications, filed just 7 months ago. 3. Bank records showing 17 wire transfers totaling $147,500 from Synapse Analytics to a shell company named Visio Magna, LLC. 4. The misdirected email from his patent lawyer. 5. Text messages recovered from a cloud backup where Victor promised our competitor he would deliver the company free of the deadweight. 6. A sworn affidavit from Will, a junior developer who overheard Victor boasting on a call about sidelining the tech nerd so the adults can cash out. 7. The ironic coincidence was the cherry on top. Visio Magna, Latin for great vision, the very word he'd used to publicly execute me. Sterling filed an emergency injunction and a lawsuit for breach of fiduciary duty, intellectual property theft, and corporate fraud. The decoy was simple. We served his lawyer with a minor preliminary notice about a potential severance dispute. Victor saw it as a nuisance, the last gasp of a failed partner. He walked onto that InnovateCon stage believing he had already won. He smiled when I stepped to the microphone, a magnanimous king granting an audience to a commoner. Of course, Zara, fire away. I kept my voice even, my questions simple. I'd like to talk about the genesis of the Synapse algorithm. Can you tell the audience when you first developed the core framework? His confidence faltered for a fraction of a second. He launched into a rambling, vague answer about inspiration and late-night brainstorming. I let him finish. "That's interesting," I said. "Because server logs, which are admissible in court, show that the framework was created and finalized by me on October 11th, 2021. Your first patent application was filed on November 3rd, 2023. Can you help me understand that 2-year discrepancy?" A murmur went through the crowd. Victor's smile vanished. His face went from confused to hunted. He started to say my name, a protest forming on his lips. I didn't let him. "And while we're on the topic of vision, can you explain to your investors why $147,500 was wired from Synapse Analytics to an LLC you secretly control, called Visio Magna?" A court-ordered injunction freezing all of Synapse's assets was served to your attorney backstage 10 minutes ago. He stared at me, his mouth slightly open. The bravado, the charm, the entire carefully constructed empire crumbled in an instant under the harsh glare of the stage lights. The event organizers were already moving toward the stage. "Zara," he whispered, the name a hollow question mark in the sudden, vast silence of the auditorium. I leaned into the microphone, my voice clear and calm. "It takes a visionary to build an empire, Victor, and an auditor to take it down." The fallout was immediate and spectacular. The tech blogs feasted on the story. InnovateCon keynote ends in fraud allegations. My phone vibrated with calls and texts until I finally turned it off. The next morning, Miss Sterling handled everything. Faced with our mountain of evidence, Victor didn't fight. He settled. The judgment was brutal and swift. He was forced to sign over 100% of the company and all its intellectual property to me, repay the stolen $147,500 plus damages, and was bound by a non-compete so restrictive he couldn't work in data analytics for 5 years. 6 months later, a former colleague sent me a screenshot. It was Victor's new LinkedIn profile. His title was Regional Sales Manager for a mid-tier office supply company.